I had everything handed to me. Private jets, designer clothes, and a last name that opened every door. But inside, I was failing every test, failing my father, failing myself. Everyone gave up on me, until one day, a school janitor, a woman no one ever noticed, said something that cut through all my defenses. I thought she was just there to clean the floors. I had no idea she was about to clean out my soul and rebuild me from the ground up. My name is Ethan Vance, and for the first 17 years of my life, I was the sole heir to a kingdom I didn't want, and a name that felt more like a cage than a crown. My father, Marcus Vance, was a tech tycoon, a man whose face graced the cover of Forbes as regularly as the changing seasons. My childhood wasn't measured in scraped knees and backyard adventures, but in the sterile silence of private jets, the curated perfection of meals prepared by personal chefs, and birthday parties where famous musicians were hired as background noise. I grew up surrounded by everything, which is another way of saying I grew up with nothing that mattered. The one thing missing from my gilded cage was a purpose. At 17, I was a senior at the Atherton Preparatory Academy, one of the most elite private high schools in Atlanta. I hadn't earned my place there through merit. The Vance name was a golden key that had unlocked the door. No strenuous interviews, no entrance exams. Just a quiet, multi-million-dollar donation to the school's development fund, and a reputation that did all the talking for me. Inside those marble hallways, lined with the oil-painted portraits of powerful, dead alumni who stared down with judgmental eyes, I was a ghost of a different kind. I was known for three things: my staggering arrogance, my ridiculously expensive clothes, and my spectacular, consistent academic failure. My grades were a running joke, a form of performance art. I treated my classes like a boring movie I was forced to watch, smirking through lectures, mocking the teachers who were paid handsomely to tolerate me. And they did tolerate me. They passed me with mercy grades, a gentleman's C-. Not out of kindness, but out of a deep-seated institutional fear. They were afraid of losing the Vance family's next multi-million-dollar donation to the new science wing. I didn't care. Why would I? One day, I would inherit an empire of code and capital. What could an A+ in trigonometry do for me that my last name couldn't? When the school counselor, a well-meaning woman with tired eyes named Mrs. Albright, called me in to discuss my lack of engagement, I leaned back in the plush leather chair in her office and gave her the line that would become my legend. "Ma'am," I said with a lazy, dismissive smile, "my father's company is worth more than the entire endowment of this school. I could buy this place tomorrow and turn it into a parking lot if I wanted to. What grade is going to change that?" The quote spread through the student body like wildfire, cementing my status as the untouchable, arrogant prince of Atherton. No one dared to confront me. The students either envied me or despised me, but they all kept their distance. The faculty teetoed around me, their silence and deference feeding the very emptiness I was trying so desperately to ignore. At home, the air was even colder. My father was a man carved from granite, a self-made billionaire who had clawed his way to the top from nothing. He believed in results, in metrics, in victory. He had no patience for weakness, especially not from his own blood. "You are an embarrassment to my name," he said one night, his voice as cold and hard as steel, after yet another call from the school. He didn't even look up from the financial reports on his tablet. "You are an embarrassment to my name. If you were an employee, you would have been fired a long time ago." I crossed my arms, the familiar wall of defiance rising inside me. "But I'm not your employee, Dad. I'm your son." He finally looked at me then. his eyes devoid of any warmth, like two chips of ice. "The world does not care whose son you are, Ethan. The world only cares what you can do. Either you become someone of substance, or you will be just another rich kid with a famous last name and no spine. And I promise you, I will not carry you." The silence that followed was a physical blow. He wasn't bluffing. He was dead serious. In his world, I was a failing asset, a bad investment, and my father always cut his losses. The next day, I showed up at school acting like nothing had happened. I parked my sleek Audi R8, a casual gift for my last birthday, in the faculty parking lot, a deliberate act of defiance. I walked the halls like a king, surveying his kingdom. But inside, I was crumbling. The walls of my carefully constructed fortress of arrogance were beginning to crack. And then I saw her. I really saw her. She was an older black woman, probably in her 50s, mopping the floor near a side entrance. Her posture was perfectly upright, her movements economical and precise, a quiet dance of practiced efficiency. Her janitor's uniform was worn and wrinkled, but her presence was not. There was a quiet, unshakable dignity about her. I didn't notice her, not consciously. To me, she was invisible, just the janitor, a piece of the background scenery of my life. But the pressure began to mount. The failing grades became a constant reminder of my father's ultimatum. And then he made his move. The credit cards were cut off, the car keys were confiscated. I was informed by his stone-faced assistant that from now on I would be taking the yellow school bus. It was a public humiliation of the highest order, a deliberate stripping of my status. One of those bitter cold mornings, as I trudged through the hallway feeling the weight of 1,000 mocking stares, I passed her again. This time, I noticed she was whispering something to herself as she worked, a soft, rhythmic murmur. As I got closer, I could make out the words. "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." I stopped in my tracks. The quote, so out of place in this temple of manufactured achievement, struck me like a small, sharp stone. "What did you just say?" She looked up from her mop, and her eyes met mine. They were calm, intelligent, and completely, utterly unafraid of me. "Nothing you are ready to understand, boy." I let out a short, surprised laugh, a reflexive defense mechanism. But something in her words, in the way she looked at me, without a trace of the deference or fear I was so accustomed to, stung. She turned and went back to her work, leaving me alone in the quiet hallway, the ancient words of Socrates echoing in my empty, privileged world. My life as I knew it was unraveling. The test scores came back, each one a fresh wave of humiliation. Literature, 18 out of 100. The teacher's comment, scrawled in angry red ink at the bottom, "Did you even read the passage?" Math, 24%. History, 31%. Biology, a solid, undeniable 0. It wasn't funny anymore. It was terrifying. Mrs. Albright, the school counselor, called me in again. This time, her voice was not gentle. She said, "Ethan, you are academically at risk." I'm not talking about bad behavior. I'm talking about catastrophic failure. You have had 3 of the best private tutors in the state. They all quit, and they all said the same thing in their final reports. You are unteachable. That shut me up. The word unteachable landed like a punch to the gut. It was my father's verdict, now echoed by the professionals. It was my official, documented status as a failure. Later that day, feeling the weight of that word crushing me, I ducked out a back entrance to avoid the pitying or mocking stares of my classmates. And there she was again, The janitor, scrubbing up a soda spill near the cafeteria, her movements slow and deliberate. I stopped. I don't know why. I just couldn't walk past her. "You said something last time," I began, my voice sounding weak even to my own ears. "About Socrates." She stood up slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. "And you remember it?"
Yeah, I admitted. It stuck with me. It's kind of weird, isn't it? A janitor quoting ancient Greek philosophers? She crossed her arms, her gaze steady and piercing. "I find it much weirder," she said, her voice calm and clear, "when a boy with the entire world at his feet cannot pass a simple reading test." The truth of it, so plainly spoken, hurt more than my father's rage ever had. It wasn't an attack. It was a simple, irrefutable observation. The words tumbled out of me before I could stop them, a raw, desperate plea from a place of broken pride I didn't know I had. "Teach me then. Help me. Please." She studied me for a long, silent moment, her wise eyes searching my face, looking for something beyond the arrogant facade I had worn for so long. "I have one condition," she finally said. "You leave your name, your money, and your pride at that door. When you are with me, you start from zero. You start from the floor." "Fine," I whispered, the fight completely gone out of me. I can't keep failing." The next morning, I arrived at the school before sunrise. The building was a silent, sleeping giant wrapped in a cold, silent fog. I found her, as she had instructed, in the east wing. Her name, I learned, was Sarah. She was polishing the floor with slow, precise, meditative circles. "I remember what I said," she told me, her voice echoing in the empty hallway. "I also said it would not be easy." "I don't care," I insisted. "I need this." She told me about her life. She had been a tenured professor at the University of Chicago, English literature and philosophy. She had published articles, won awards. "Why would you leave that for this?" I asked, gesturing at the mop and bucket. She looked me dead in the eye, her gaze unwavering, completely without shame. "I blew the whistle on a plagiarism scandal involving a powerful tenured dean. I refused to be silenced, and for that, I was blacklisted. The academic world is very small, Ethan. The people I thought were my friends and colleagues disappeared. Then, my husband died in a car accident. Life takes everything you thought was yours," she said, her voice soft but not weak, "and it leaves you with nothing but what you truly know. And I still know how to teach." For the first time in my 17 years of life, I saw what real strength looked like. It had nothing to do with money or power. She handed me a worn, battered notebook. "Every morning, 1 hour before class, you meet me here. Every evening, after I finish my work, you sit in the empty cafeteria and you write. You write what you learned, what you felt, what you understood. There will be no grades, only honesty." I opened the notebook. The blank pages were both an invitation and a terrifying challenge. "What if I fail again?" I whispered. "Then," she said with a small, wise smile, "you are finally doing it right." And so my real education began. It was a strange, almost sacred rhythm. I would arrive in the pre-dawn darkness, and she would greet me not with a lecture, but with a question. We would sit on the cold, polished floor of the hallway, a billionaire's son and a janitor, and we would talk about Thoreau, about Baldwin, about the nature of justice. She didn't teach me to memorize dates or formulas. She taught me to feel. What did that sentence make you feel, Ethan? Why do you think this character chose to stay silent? What does courage sound like on the page? The notebook, my confessional, filled up. not with perfect academic answers, but with raw, honest, messy thoughts. I wrote about my father. I wrote about the crushing pressure of his name. I wrote about how angry I was at being so empty all the time. And she read every word. She never judged. She would just return the notebook the next morning with a single, probing question written in the margins. One night, as I was writing in the empty cafeteria, two boys from the football team walked by. One of them, Josh, the star quarterback, sneered. "Look at little Vance now, writing love letters to the janitor." A hot surge of my old, familiar rage rose in my throat. I clenched my jaw, ready to lash out with a venomous, cutting remark. But Sarah, who was quietly cleaning a nearby table, placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You do not measure the depth of the ocean with a shallow ruler." The simple, profound truth of that line disarmed my anger completely. I just nodded and went back to my writing. That night, a message from my father lit up my phone. "They have updated your academic record. This is your last warning. Turn things around or you are out. No trust fund, no apartment, nothing." I stared at the message, but for the first time, I didn't feel the familiar sting of fear or the hot rush of defiance. I just felt ready. The day of the final parent-teacher conference arrived. I walked into the counselor's office, clutching a folder. It was filled with my redone assignments, essays marked with praise, and a draft of a piece I had written under Sarah's guidance, titled "The Illusion of Power." For the first time in my life, I was proud of my schoolwork. My father was already there, a thundercloud in a sharp gray suit. He snatched the report from the counselor's hand and scanned it. The grades were better, not perfect, but steadily improving. The teacher's remarks were glowing, shows initiative, significant change in attitude. "This is what you call progress?" he snapped, his voice dripping with condescension. "I'm trying, Dad. Honestly." "With whom? The last tutor quit. Who has been helping you?" I took a deep breath. "Sarah, the janitor." Silence. Then a dry, sharp, humorless laugh. "You are kidding me." "She was a professor, Dad. She is a janitor now," he cut in, his voice dangerously low. "You are embarrassing this family, Ethan. You are wasting your time with people who have nothing to offer you." "She sees me," I said, the words burning my tongue. "You never did." He stared at me as if I were a stranger. "If you continue down this road, you will lose everything. Do not test me." "Maybe I need to lose everything," I shot back, my voice trembling, "to finally figure out who I actually am." He didn't answer. He just turned and walked away.
The next day, I found out Sarah had been fired. Early, quietly, escorted to the gate, no chance to say goodbye. The school said it was budget cuts. We all knew it was a lie. I searched the halls for her, but she was gone. Her mop, her bucket, her quiet, dignified presence, all gone. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My anchor was gone. My fire was gone. My grades started slipping again, not because I didn't know the material, but because the purpose behind learning it had vanished. I walked the halls like a ghost. The quiet corners of the school where we used to meet felt hollow and empty. I wasn't just losing a teacher, I was losing the only person who had ever truly seen me. The loneliness that I had kept at bay with her help came rushing back in, a cold, suffocating tide. Then I saw the announcement on the main bulletin board, tacked up with a jarring cheerfulness. End of year senior speech contest. Topic: what it means to win in life. I stared at the paper, at the bold, optimistic letters. Winning. The word felt like a cruel joke. I had lost the only thing that mattered. But then, as I stood there, a new feeling began to replace the despair. A slow, burning anger.
They had taken her from me. They had silenced her. They thought they had won. I went home and wrote. All night. I didn't write for a grade. I didn't write for a scholarship. I wrote for her. I wrote for the truth. The night of the speech contest, the auditorium was a sea of expensive coats and the soft murmur of polite, privileged conversation. I stood behind the heavy velvet curtain, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I wore a plain navy shirt and dark jeans, no flashy watch, no designer shoes, no last name pinned to my chest, just me and my story. My name was called. I stepped onto the stage, into the bright, unforgiving spotlight. The room fell quiet. My name is Ethan Vance, I began, my voice clear and steady, echoing in the vast space. Some of you know me as the kid who wasted a golden ticket, the one who failed, who didn't care. They say I had everything, but I was missing the one thing that truly mattered, someone who believed in me, until she showed up. I took a breath, finding my rhythm. She was not my teacher, not officially. She was not paid to help me. She had no office, no authority. She had a mop and a heart big enough to see through my anger to the fear underneath. I scanned the silent, watching audience, my eyes passing over my father's stone-like face in the front row. She taught me how to read between the lines, in books and in life. She taught me how to think, how to listen. She did not just clean the floors of this school. She cleared the fog in my head. The air in the room shifted. People leaned forward. But she was fired, I said, my voice ringing with a quiet, controlled fury. She was silenced, because systems, like this one, do not like it when someone from the bottom starts making a real, meaningful difference. So today, I am not speaking to impress you. I am speaking to honor her. I held up my worn, battered notebook. She told me that learning is transformation, that real winning is not about the grades you get or the money you have. It is about becoming someone worth remembering. She may not be here tonight, but she is in every single word I am saying. So what does it mean to win in life? It means waking up. It means letting go of your name, your pride, and your fear, and finding your truth. And then, it means using that truth to lift up others. Silence. A profound, echoing silence. Then, one person started clapping, then another, and then the entire room erupted. A standing ovation. It was a wave of sound, of validation, of support. I saw teachers, students, even the stern-faced Mrs. Albright on their feet, tears in their eyes. And from the very back of the room, standing in the shadows, was a woman with a headscarf and quiet, proud eyes. She was wiping a tear from her cheek and smiling. Sarah. She had come back, quietly, just to see me shine. And on that stage, under those bright lights, I wasn't a Vance anymore. I was my own name.
The video of that speech, filmed on a dozen iPhones, exploded. It spread first through the students, then to the alumni network, and then, inevitably, to the press. Billionaire's son credits fired school janitor for saving his life. The headline, with its irresistible blend of privilege, scandal, and redemption, traveled further and faster than any Vance Corporation press release ever had. The school administration went into damage control, but it was too late. The story was out. And the hero of that story was not the school, not my father, but Sarah. She was inundated with offers. A local college asked her to give a guest lecture. Then another. A progressive online university offered her a full-time teaching position, curriculum development, complete academic freedom. Doors that had been slammed shut in her face for years were suddenly blown wide open, not because of a resume, but because of a truth that could no longer be ignored. I passed every single one of my final exams, not with pity grades, but with purpose. The Ivy League offers my father had so carefully arranged were still on the table, but they felt hollow, like relics from a life I no longer wanted. I respectfully declined them and chose a small, liberal arts college in Vermont, known for its focus on social justice and education. When the reporters asked why, I gave them a simple answer. Because I want to learn how to teach the way she taught me. And I want to help build the kind of places where no one has to ask to be seen. The day I graduated from high school, I drove my new, modest, second-hand car to a small, neat house in a quiet neighborhood. I knocked on the door, holding an envelope. Sarah opened it, a look of quiet surprise on her face. Inside the envelope was my diploma, my college acceptance letter, and a handwritten proposal. I want to start something, I told her, my voice filled with a passion I had never known before. A center, a non-profit, a place where people, kids and adults, can learn like I did, with honesty, with depth, without shame. A place for the unteachables, for the ones the system has written off. I want to call it the Sarah Institute. Tears filled her eyes. Why me, Ethan? Because, I said, my voice thick with emotion, everything I am now, everything I hope to be, started with you. Only if we do it together, she whispered. Always, I replied. Months later, the Sarah Institute opened its doors in a repurposed community center in the heart of the city. We started small. Classes on critical thinking, mentorship programs for at-risk youth, late-night writing circles for adults. It was a place for the kids who had been told they were failures, for the adults who thought their chance had passed. Sarah taught again, with chalk, with books, with a fierce and gentle freedom that was breathtaking to watch. I ran the center's programs, handled the fundraising, but I never stopped being her student. And the city took notice. Small grants came in, articles were written, but the real reward, the real proof of our success, came one afternoon when a 12-year-old girl, a girl who had been expelled from 2 different schools, handed Sarah a notebook and said, This place made me feel smart for the first time in my life." Sarah cried that day, and so did I.
My father even came, quietly, to the Institute's 1-year anniversary celebration. He didn't announce himself. He just stood in the back, a solitary, imposing figure in a world of secondhand furniture and vibrant, hopeful energy. He watched me speak, not with the arrogance of my youth, but with a quiet passion for the work we were doing. He listened as I talked about justice, about humility, about the transformative power of a real education. After the event, we met outside, under the cool glow of a streetlight. The silence between us was long, but it was not cold. "I did not expect to cry," he finally admitted, his voice rough. "I did not expect to forgive you," I replied, my own voice just as honest. "But I think I'm getting there." And then, for the first time since I was a small child, we hugged. It was awkward, clumsy, not a hug of complete reconciliation, not yet, but it was a start. Not as a father and his heir, but as 2 men trying to find their way back to each other. Years passed. The Institute grew, its roots spreading deep into the community. One evening, I took the stage again, this time to accept a National Education Award. I held the heavy glass trophy, looked out at the sea of faces, and I thought of that first, terrifying speech. I held the microphone, paused, and said, They told me I failed everything until I learned one thing that changed my life. Greatness does not come from being seen. It comes from seeing others. And sometimes, the person who teaches you the most important lessons is not in a suit, in a corner office. They are holding a mop, quoting philosophers while no one is listening. Her name is Sarah Wallace, and she did not just save my grades. She saved my soul.
Perhaps we will not see you again, so subscribe to this channel to listen to more interesting stories.